Going to begin with the next session. In the next session, we have lots and lots of speakers. I'm going to show you some of our incredible speakers right now. And then I'm going to hand over to our wonderful moderator, Ms. Foluke, to take over the session. But before I do that, let's show us some of our incredible speakers. Right, so we have the first speaker, Professor Andries Jordaan. Ms. Foluke, please feel free to take his biography. Thank you.
Thank you so much. The Happy World Environment Day to us all. Foluke Genewa, the moderator for this section. Today we have the privilege to have three distinguished experts, Dr. Andries J. Jordaan, Professor Marijana Kopivic-Solomon, and Professor David Lopez-Carr for this section. We'll be sharing their insights and expertise on this critical issue we'll be discussing today, that is land restoration, desertification, and drought resilience. So let's dive in. I'm starting with Professor J. Jordaan. Before that, let me quickly go through his biography. Professor Andries J. Jordaan is a registered professional natural scientist and is also registered as a professional disaster manager. He has a PhD in agricultural economics with a focus on drought risk assessment. He's a leading scientist on disaster and disaster risk in Africa and was director of the Disaster Management Training and Educational Center at the University of Freetown, Free State from 2015 to 2018. He has 23 years experience as a commercial farmer in the Eastern Free State and was also an entrepreneur with 10 years experience in agricultural business management. As a scientist, Professor Jordaan manages to bridge the gap between scientific theory and implementation. He completed research projects and consultants in more than 14 African countries, either as an independent consultant or in a multidisciplinary research team. Please welcome Professor Andries J. Jordaan. Professor, the floor is yours. Thank you so much for coming.
Thank you. Thank you. Good afternoon, everybody. And I would like to start to say it's really I'm exciting to see the youngsters so passionate about our land, about land degradation, etc. I was following them on the debate, so that is really nice. Let me just upload my presentation. Good. Thank you, Chair. So I would like to be practical in a sense to say, to look at drought. How do we implement drought management, and how do we change from a response mode to preparedness, because drought is something that is always with us. It's not a new phenomenon. It is not caused by climate change. However, the impacts of drought is increasing. So what we found in South Africa over the past 100 years is that if you look at the data, the meteorological data, there was no significant change in the frequency and severity of meteorological droughts. But there's definitely a change on the impact of drought and the agricultural drought on the impact of people and also in an urban setting. But in our drought, we remain in drought response, and we don't really over the past 100, 200 years learn lessons from previous droughts. If you look at South Africa, And our CSIR did some excellent research on drought and climate change and the change of drought. If you look at South Africa, the tendency of drought in the short run from 2015 to 2044, we can see from this, there are certain areas where we will receive more rain, other areas where we expect less rain. But during the period from 35 to 64, we expect larger parts of the country to experience more drought, to experience less rain and warmer temperatures, but there are certain areas where we also experience wetter conditions and more rain. So what are the challenges that we experience in drought management? Is that drought response, and this is specifically in the agricultural sector, but it's also very similar in the urban environment, is that drought response is too little, too late. And then the question is, when is drought really a disaster? Because drought is part of our normal climate zone, so it's not supposed to be a disaster if we plan properly for it. Then we also have a challenge in terms of when do we clear drought disasters? Normally, disaster declaration depends on pressure from stakeholders or from politicians, and that is not how it should be. And then we should also acknowledge that drought response mechanisms are not the same for all sectors. For example, small-scale farmers with little resources are much more vulnerable to drought, and in most cases we have to declare drought disaster and activate safety nets much earlier for small-scale farmers than what is the case for your large-scale commercial farmers who have access to more resources. So in terms of drought declaration, some of the challenges that we have is that we should actually treat drought as an extreme event with extreme impact and not as a disaster. Drought is part of the climate regime, and we have in SADC, in Southern Africa, always somewhere, and even within South Africa, there are always somewhere a drought in South Africa. Then our legislation and drought policy frameworks allow for state of disaster declaration in a 3-month period, and that is not suitable for droughts. It can work for floods, for fast onset disasters, but definitely not for drought, because drought is a slow onset disaster, and the recovery from drought can take place long after we received the first rains. So it is also possible to monitor drought progression, and that is actually what I would like to talk about. We need to have a classification system for drought that allows for contingency during the different drought classifications. And then we also need to activate these contingency plans according to the different drought classes. Now, what we developed in South Africa, and this is also aligned to international best practice, we classified drought into 5 categories: a D0, D1 up to a D4, which is the most extreme drought. Then we also acknowledge that we have meteorological drought, hydrological drought, agricultural drought, and your socio-economical drought. And there you can see your meteorological drought might stop soon after the first good rains, but your hydrological drought, it takes some time for the dams to get full. Your agricultural drought can take up to 2-3 years, depending on what type of farming system you're on. And then your socio-economical drought, the impact of droughts can take much longer. It can take in a farming environment up to 5-6 years to recover to a situation where you were before the drought. In terms of primary indicators for drought and what we have available in South Africa, and we receive weekly updates of this data, are the meteorological drought, and for that we use the percentage of normal precipitation and the SPI, the Standard Precipitation Index or the SPEI. So those data is available from our weather service. Then we also have remote sensing data, the NDVI, PASG, the VCI, and there are also a number of others. I think there are currently we're using 6 of those indicators. And there you can see the different thresholds for the different types of drought. Then we also have our hydrological indicators, which is a CPC, soil moisture index, dam levels, stream flow and groundwater levels. So all of these indicators are available on a monthly basis, and according to that we can classify drought in the different categories. And what we do, and well, I'm one of the receivers of this information, our Agricultural Research Council, as well as our South African Weather Service. They are responsible for these categories and for the publication of these categories, and they make it available for each of our quaternary catchment areas in South Africa. So in terms of drought management, we need to acknowledge that all of us are living in a specific climate profile where we have extreme wet periods or extreme dry periods. Rainfall in South Africa, precipitation in South Africa varies from less than 50 millimeters in the western parts of the country to more than 1,000 millimeters in the eastern parts of the country. So doesn't matter where you are, there are this specific climate zone. And what is important for drought preparation and drought mitigation is to, during the good years, to make sure that you do your preparedness planning, to make timely operational decisions, and also have your mitigation planning and preparedness in place for both these extreme wet periods as well as extreme drought periods. But the important thing about drought classification is that as drought progresses from a D0 to a D4, you can implement contingency plans for each of the drought classes, so that when we reach normally your D3 drought, we classify that already as a disaster drought, so that when you reach your D3 drought, you are already prepared. What is also important then is to develop contingency plans for after the drought, implement drought recovery plans. How do we do that? And that is also important for the recovery period after a drought. It's equally important to have these contingency plans in place than the implement contingency plans for during the progression of drought. So what we did, and one of my students just completed a study on livestock farmers to develop contingency plans for extensive livestock farming. So for each classification, what we did was to develop contingency plans for grazing, for water provision, for animal management, for financial management on the farm, as well as for social management. And those contingency plans are activated during each categories of drought, so that the farmer knows during a D3, D2 drought, he must do X, Y, Z. During a D3 drought, what he should do in terms of grazing, in terms of water provision on his farm, in terms of animal management, etc., etc. But we realize that we also need contingency plans for all agricultural sectors, not only the livestock sector. The crop sector is differently affected. Short-term droughts, seasonal droughts played a critical role in the crop sector, which might not be the case in the livestock sector. But then also agricultural businesses and cooperatives need to be prepared. They also need to activate their contingency plans in order for them to be in a position to support farmers as the drought progresses. Then also financial organizations. Normally during a D3 drought, that is the time when farmers start consolidating debts. They stop buying new infrastructure, investing in new infrastructure, and some of them really become in financial trouble. So what we also then propose is that our private sector in the country should also develop their own contingency plans so that they know what to expect when in their specific region farmers start experiencing a D3 or a or a D4 drought. And the same recommendation for municipalities and metros where they depend on urban water supply. It's also for them important and follow the progression of drought so that they can implement their contingency plans. And then also government itself, the different government organizations should be ready as drought progresses to activate safety nets if needed, to activate those in time. So though there are definite policy implications at the country level when you want to implement and when you implement such a system, the first thing, there should be a national drought monitor unit, somebody from government side taking responsibility to monitor drought and provide accurate information. There should be a drought classification system which everybody understands, and then also the development of these different contingency plans according to the classification, and also to be ready if it's needed to declare a state of disaster. I thank you, Chair.
Thank you so much, Professor Jordaan, for that insightful presentation. So I just have just one question because of our time. I'll just ask just one question. And my question is, it's no doubt that a lot of countries where they're experiencing drought at this moment and there's need for action. So how do you think their countries can better integrate drought response with preparedness? How do you think their countries can better integrate drought response with preparedness? Thank you.
Yes, I definitely think we can, if we monitor timely and accurately, so that we are prepared, and then the contingency plans, that is the main purpose of contingency plans, to be better prepared and not to wait until it is a D3 or a D4 drought, the most extreme droughts, and then start making plans. So we should make our plans, we should prepare during the good years. For example, farmers should make up their stock for the banks, etc., so that when it's dry, they don't have to buy fodder at inflated prices. So they are at different levels, at operational levels and strategic levels, ways that we can be better prepared.
Thank you so much, Professor. Because of our time, I think we won't be able to take more questions. We appreciate you for attending and for honoring our invitation to this year World Environment Day. We wish you best of luck. Thank you so much.
Thank you.